My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 28 years old. And on the night my parents found out I wasn't their biological daughter, my father handed me a $100 bill, set my suitcase on the front porch, and closed the door without saying goodbye. Not a hug, not an explanation, not even the courtesy of watching me walk away, just a door, and a click, and the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place. I stood on that porch for 4 minutes. I counted. I remember the porch light flickering the way it always did when the bulb was about to go. I remember the smell of my mother's pot roast still drifting through the storm window. I remember thinking, they're eating dinner in there right now, and I am standing outside with $100 and a suitcase and nowhere to go. I was 18 years old. I had done nothing wrong, and the people who raised me had just decided I wasn't worth keeping. But here's what they didn't know, what I didn't know yet either. That the next 10 years would build me into something they couldn't have imagined, and that the day they showed up at my door needing help, I would be ready. Before I tell you everything that happened, take a second to like this video if this kind of story resonates with you, and subscribe if you want to hear more. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I genuinely want to know who's out there. Now let me take you back to the beginning. The Callahan house sat on a corner lot in Denton, Ohio. White siding, green shutters, a mailbox with a flag that never stood up straight because my father had bent the hinge fixing it himself and never bothered to fix it again. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. A kitchen with yellow wallpaper that my mother had chosen in 1994 and refused to replace because she said it still looked fine. It did not still look fine. My father, Robert Callahan, worked 22 years at the same auto parts distributor. Same desk, same coffee mug, same route home. He wasn't a cruel man by nature. He was a rigid one. He had a version of the world that made sense to him, and he did not welcome complications. My mother, Diane, taught 2nd grade at Westfield Elementary for 18 years. She was good at her job. Patient in ways that you have to be when you spend your days with 7-year-olds. At home, that patience had a threshold. And she'd found it by the time I was a teenager. Though I couldn't have told you why then. I was their only child, or so I believed. I was a decent student, quiet. I read a lot. I helped around the house without being asked because I had learned early that being useful was the best way to take up space without causing problems. I wasn't in any trouble. I didn't have a record. I didn't drink or stay out late. I had one close friend, a girl named Petra, who I'd known since 5th grade. I worked part-time at a bakery on Route 7 on weekends. I was 18. I was 2 months from graduating high school. I had applied to 3 colleges and gotten into 2. None of that mattered on March 11th. That was the night everything changed. And it changed the way most devastating things do. Without warning. On an ordinary Tuesday, during a dinner nobody saw coming, I'd come home from my shift at the bakery a little after 7. Flour on my jacket, tired in the way that a 6-hour shift on your feet makes you tired. The kind of tired where all you want is a shower and to sit down. My parents were already at the kitchen table when I walked in. That was unusual. They normally ate at 6:30. The food was still on the stove, but no one had served it yet. My father was sitting very still. My mother had her hands flat on the table like she was bracing for something. I knew something was wrong before either of them spoke. "Nora," my father said, "sit down." I sat. He placed a document on the table between us, an envelope already opened, papers folded once and then spread flat. I could see the letterhead from where I sat, a medical testing company. The kind that does ancestry panels and genealogy work. The kind that people order when they want to know where they came from. I didn't know then that my mother had ordered it 6 weeks earlier. She'd told me she was curious about her European heritage. She'd swabbed my cheek in the kitchen one evening while I was doing homework, said it was just a fun thing, a gift to herself. Said I should do mine too so we could compare. I had said sure. I hadn't thought about it again. What I did not know was that she had also submitted my father's sample, and her own, and had paid extra for a full family panel comparison. The results were on the table. I am not your biological daughter. That's what the paper said, in the technical language of genetics and probability ranges. But that's what it meant. There was a 0% match. Not close. Not a margin of error situation. 0. I looked at my parents. My father's jaw was set. My mother was looking at her hands. Did you know? I asked her first, because something in her posture told me she had known longer than tonight. She didn't answer. That was its own answer. There was an explanation eventually. Not a complete one. Not a kind one. The story, told in pieces over the next 30 minutes, was this. There had been a hospital mix-up. They had been told about it when I was 4 days old, before they'd even brought me home. A nurse had come into the room and explained quietly that there had been an error in the nursery. Their biological daughter had been accidentally placed with another family. The other family had already left. There would be a process to sort it out. My parents had chosen not to sort it out. They had taken me home instead. They had signed paperwork. They had, for reasons that were never fully explained to me, decided to keep the baby they had and not pursue the one who was theirs by blood. For 18 years, they had not told me. I sat at that yellow kitchen table and tried to understand what I was being told, that I had been known not to be theirs since before I could form memories, that every birthday, every Christmas, every school play and bad grade and good grade and ordinary Tuesday dinner had happened inside a secret they had decided to keep from me. That somewhere in the world there was a woman or a girl who was biologically theirs and who had grown up not knowing that either. Why are you telling me now? I asked. My father folded his hands. His voice was careful, measured. The way it was when he was trying to be fair about something he had already decided. We found her, he said. I stared at him. Our daughter. He cleared his throat. Our biological daughter. She found us, actually. She did one of those ancestry tests through a different service. She's been looking for us for 2 years. The pot roast was still on the stove. I could hear the burner. Low heat. The way my mother always kept it on low when she was waiting on someone. She's coming here, my mother said. Next week. She's 20 years old. Her name is Cassidy. I didn't say anything for a very long time. Then my father said the sentence I have replayed in my mind more times than I can count. The sentence I will probably carry for the rest of my life. We've been doing a lot of thinking, Nora, about what's fair, about what makes sense going forward, and we think it would be better for everyone if you made other arrangements. I was 2 months from graduating high school. It was March. I had applied to colleges. I had a shift at the bakery on Thursday. Other arrangements. My mother stood up from the table and walked to the counter. She opened her purse. She counted out 5 20s, $100. She set them on the table in front of me and smoothed them flat with her palm the way you straighten out a receipt. You can stay tonight, my father said. We'll help you pack in the morning. They let me stay one night. I lay in my room and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house make its sounds. The refrigerator cycling, the heat clicking through the vents, the familiar creaks of a house I had lived in for my entire life. In the morning, my mother made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. She set a plate in front of me without meeting my eyes. My father was already at work. I ate the eggs because I didn't know when I would eat again. Then I packed 2 suitcases, everything that fit. I left behind the furniture, the bookshelves, the lamp I'd had since I was 9. I took my documents, my social security card, my birth certificate, my high school transcripts. I took the money from my bakery job that I'd been saving for a used laptop. I took the $100 from the kitchen table. I called Petra from the driveway. She answered on the second ring. Something happened, I said. Can I come over? 15 minutes later, I was sitting on her bedroom floor, and she was on the phone with her mother downstairs explaining the situation. Petra's mother, Janet Hess, was a woman who did not flinch at inconvenient truths. By the time Petra came back upstairs, the answer was already decided. You're staying here, Petra said. As long as you need. I stayed for 4 months. If you're still with me, I want to stop here for a second, because I think some of you already know what this kind of displacement feels like. Not necessarily this exact situation. But the particular silence of being told you're not enough to keep, the way the ground shifts under something you believed was solid. If that resonates with you, type "I know that silence" in the comments. I'll be reading them. Now let me tell you what I built. I finished high school. Petra's mother drove me to graduation because I had no one else to ask. I walked across the stage in a borrowed dress and received my diploma, and did not cry until I was in the car on the way back. I enrolled in the community college in the fall because it was the only school I could still afford. The 2 universities I'd been accepted to required deposits I could no longer make. I deferred everything, took out loans for community college, and worked 3 part-time jobs to cover the rest. Mornings at the bakery still, evenings at a restaurant on 5th Street, weekends at a hardware store where the manager, a man named Gil Tanner, liked that I showed up exactly on time every single day. Gil was the first person who told me I was good at something specific. "You have a head for systems," he told me one afternoon when I'd reorganized the inventory process without being asked, and saved the store an estimated 4 hours of labor per week. "You ever think about operations?" I had not thought about operations, but I started thinking about it. 2 years of community college, then a transfer to the state university on a merit scholarship I applied for 6 times before receiving. I studied business operations. I graduated in 3 years instead of 4 by taking summer courses and overloading my schedule every semester. I was not the smartest person in any of my classes. I was the most consistent. There is a difference, and it matters more over time than people realize. My first real job after graduation was at a logistics company in Columbus, entry level. $41,000 a year. I rented a studio apartment 12 minutes from the office and furnished it almost entirely from estate sales and a single IKEA trip I made with Petra on a Saturday. I cooked at home 5 nights a week. I packed my lunch every day. I put 15% of every paycheck into savings and treated that number as non-negotiable. Petra got married when I was 25. I was her maid of honor. I wore a green dress she let me choose myself because she said she trusted me and I believed her. I was promoted twice in 3 years. Then I left the logistics company and took a position at a supply chain consulting firm. Better salary, more responsibility. Work that required the kind of problem-solving I was genuinely good at. By the time I was 27, I was making 6 figures. I had a 2-bedroom apartment in a building with a gym that I actually used. I had savings. I had a retirement account. I had a car that was paid off and a closet full of clothes. I had chosen slowly and deliberately because I had learned the hard way what it meant to only buy things you actually needed. I also had something harder to quantify. I had a life that I had built myself. Every single piece of it. No one had handed me a foundation. No one had co-signed my first lease, or paid my last semester tuition, or called in a favor for my first job. Every floor I was standing on, I had laid myself. That mattered to me in a way I couldn't always articulate. It still does. I thought about my parents occasionally. Not obsessively. More the way you think about a weather event that happened a long time ago. Something that shaped the landscape but was over now. I had no contact with them. They had never called, never written, never looked for me as far as I could tell. In 10 years, there had been complete silence on their end. I had made my peace with that, or something close enough to peace that I had learned to call it that. And then one Thursday morning in October, someone knocked on my apartment door. I was working from home. I had a call in 20 minutes. I was wearing a sweatshirt and had coffee in my hand when I opened the door and found my mother standing in the hallway. She looked older. That was the first thing. 10 years had moved across her face, the way time does when it hasn't been easy. Her hair was lighter, mostly gray now. She was wearing a coat I didn't recognize. Her hands were clasped in front of her at the waist, the way they always were when she was nervous. She was very nervous. "Nora," she said. I looked at her for a moment. I did not say hello. I did not open the door wider. "How did you find me?" "Petra's mother," she said. "Janet." She didn't want to. I had to call 3 times. I made a mental note to call Janet and tell her it was all right. I wasn't angry with her. There is only so long you can hold a wall against someone's mother. "What do you want?" "Can I come in?" I thought about that. I am telling you honestly that I thought about closing the door. I stood there and waited, and I chose not to. Not because I had forgiven anything. Because I was curious. And because I had learned over 10 years that the most important information usually comes from the conversations you're most tempted to avoid, I stepped back. She came in. She stood in my living room and looked around the way people do when they're trying to understand a version of you they missed. The bookshelves. The framed print above the couch that I'd bought from a local artist at a market 2 summers ago. The coffee table that had been my one real furniture splurge. Dark wood, clean lines. The stack of work documents on the kitchen counter. "You've done well," she said. I didn't respond to that. I sat down in the chair across from the couch and waited. She sat down, slowly, like her knees were bothering her. "Your father lost his job," she said. 2 years ago, the distributor closed. And then, last year, he had some health problems. His back, surgery. He's been out of work. We've been managing, but..." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "We're behind on the mortgage, 5 months behind. The bank has been. They've sent notices. We have until the end of December." I looked at her. I kept my face still. "I had learned to do that. That's not all," she said. And she said it quickly, like she needed to get it out before she lost the nerve. "Cassidy is getting married. I waited. In the spring. She's been engaged since summer. And Robert and I, we want to give her a proper wedding. She deserves it. She's had a hard time. She's been through a lot, and we want to do something good for her. But with everything happening with the house, we can't do both. We can't cover the mortgage and the wedding. We've tried to figure it out, and there's no way." She looked at me. "We need help, Nora." The room was quiet. My upstairs neighbor was walking across their floor. I could hear it. Slow, even steps. "How much?" I asked. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Like she'd expected a longer fight before we got here. "The mortgage arrears are $14,000. That would bring us current and give us a few months while Robert gets back to work. And the wedding. Cassidy has been looking at venues and a simple wedding. Something reasonable. Maybe another $15,000, $20,000. I did the math in my head. $30,000 to $35,000. I let the number sit in the air between us. "Does Dad know you're here?" "It was his idea," she said. "He wanted to come himself. His back. The drive." I nodded slowly. "And Cassidy? Does she know?" "No. She just knows we're working on it." I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and refilled my coffee, even though it didn't need refilling. I needed a moment with my back to her, not because I was emotional, because I was thinking very clearly and I needed the space to finish the thought. I turned back around. "I need a few days," I said. "Of course." She stood, quickly, like she was afraid I'd change my mind if she moved too slowly. "Whatever you need. And Nora, I want you to know that I know we didn't." "You don't have to say it right now," I said. "I'll call you." She left. I stood in my quiet apartment. My call was in 8 minutes. I picked up my phone and called Petra. She answered immediately. "Tell me everything," she said. "I'm going to pause here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking, and I know what some of you are feeling. Because if you've ever been the person who was left, who had to build from scratch while someone else got the version of the life you should have had, you are doing math right now. You're counting what it cost. You're thinking about the years. You're wondering what you would do. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? And if you want to know what I decided, make sure you're subscribed, because what happened next is the part that took me a full week to process. I took 5 days. I did not spend them agonizing. I spent them thinking carefully about what I actually wanted the outcome to be. Because I had learned this lesson slowly and at some cost, the question is never just, what do I want to do? The question is, what do I want to live with after I do it? I called Janet Hess and told her it was fine. She cried a little and I told her to stop. She laughed and that was better. I called Petra. We talked for 2 hours on a Wednesday evening, me on my couch with a blanket, her in her kitchen while her husband put the kids to bed. Petra said very little and asked very good questions. That is one of the reasons I have kept her in my life for 20 years. I thought about $35,000, what it meant to me, what it meant to them, whether money was the point. I thought about Cassidy, a woman I had never met who had been raised by the parents I lost, who was getting married in the spring, who did not know about any of this conversation, who had, as far as I knew, done nothing to me. I thought about what it meant to help someone, whether doing it out of obligation was help or whether it was something else. And I thought about the $100, the 520s, smoothed flat on the yellow kitchen table, the pot roast still on the stove, the door clicking shut. I thought about that for a long time. My mother came back on Saturday. She knocked at 10 in the morning. I had expected that. She was not someone who could wait well. I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table this time. I had made coffee and set out 2 cups because it was the polite thing to do, and I was going to be polite about this. I've made a decision, I said. She wrapped both hands around the mug. Her knuckles were white. I can't give you $35,000. Her face changed. Something crumpled at the edges. I can't, I continued, because what you're describing isn't a loan, and we both know it. It's not a transaction with terms. You're asking me to rescue you from a situation that is hard and real and also, on some level, that I watched coming from the outside and chose not to involve myself in because that was not my role. It hasn't been my role for 10 years. Nora, let me finish. She went quiet. I've thought about this carefully, I said. About what I can actually do. About what would mean something and what would just delay the inevitable. And here's where I landed. I reached into the folder I'd placed on the table before she arrived. I slid a single envelope across the surface toward her. She looked at it without picking it up. That's $100, I said. 520s. For you and Dad. For whatever you need it for. Gas. Groceries. I don't know. The room was very still. I want you to know that I didn't do this to be cruel, I said. I want you to understand that. I did it because it's the only amount that made sense. It's the amount you gave me. It's the amount you decided I was worth when I was 18 years old and had nowhere to go. Not the cost of a flight somewhere safer. Not a deposit on an apartment. Not enough for first and last month's rent. Not enough for anything, really. Just enough to say that you'd done something. That you hadn't sent me out with nothing. My mother hadn't moved. I've been thinking about that $100 for 10 years. I said. Not constantly, but it's there. It has a way of coming up when I'm doing something hard and I think about what it cost and where I started. It's the amount you put on the table for me and it's the amount I can put on the table for you. She picked up the envelope. Her hands were shaking. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said again. I mean that. I'm doing it because it's honest, because the amount is honest. And because I think if you sit with it long enough, you'll understand what I mean. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, her voice not quite steady, "What about Cassidy's wedding? Cassidy is your daughter," I said. "She's been your daughter since she was 4 days old. Figure it out." My mother stood up. She held the envelope against her chest. Her coat was still on because she hadn't taken it off when she came in. I walked her to the door. We looked at each other in the doorway. 10 years of silence and $100 and everything that lived in between. "I thought you might help us," she said. "I know you did," I said. She left. I closed the door. Not hard. Just shut it, the way you close something when you're finished with it. I stood in my hallway for a moment. The heat was running. My upstairs neighbor walked across their floor in that slow, even way. Everything the same as before. I went back to my desk and finished my work. What happened after isn't dramatic. I want to be honest about that. My mother called twice in the following week. I let both calls go to voicemail. In the first message, she said she needed to talk. In the second, she said she was sorry. I did not call back. Not because I was punishing her. Because I had said what I needed to say and I didn't have anything to add. Petra called on a Tuesday. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "You did the right thing." "I don't know about right," I said. "You did the honest thing," she said. Which in your case has always been the same thing. She wasn't wrong. I received a letter about 6 weeks later. No return address, but the handwriting was my father's. Methodical. He'd always had neat handwriting for someone who worked with his hands. I opened it standing at my kitchen counter. It was short, 3 paragraphs. He said he was sorry. Not in the elaborate way people sometimes apologize when they want something back from you. Just simply, I am sorry for what we did. I am sorry for how we did it. I should have done more. I didn't. The second paragraph said that Cassidy had found out about me. My mother had told her. He didn't explain the circumstances, just that she knew. And that Cassidy had cried for a long time and asked questions he didn't have good answers to. The third paragraph said, I hope you're well, Nora. I mean that. I folded the letter. I put it in the nightstand drawer. I didn't write back. Maybe someday I will. I haven't decided yet. Cassidy reached out 4 months later. An email. She'd found me through LinkedIn, which was a very contemporary way to discover the sibling-shaped hole in your family's history. The email was long and careful and clearly revised several times before she sent it. She introduced herself. She said she'd learned about the situation. She said she had questions and she understood completely if I didn't want to answer them. She said she didn't know what she was looking for, just that she had felt for a while like something was missing, and now she thought she might know what it was. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. Not a long email, just enough. I told her I was open to talking. I told her it wasn't her fault. I told her that I had thought about her over the years, not with resentment, just with curiosity, that I had wondered what she was like, that anyone raised by our parents would have things to navigate. That I knew something about that. We have been emailing for 3 months now, slowly, carefully. Like 2 people building a bridge from opposite sides of a river, checking the tension with every plank before adding the next. I don't know what we will become. I don't have a name for it yet. She's not my sister in any way that feels earned. She's not a stranger either. She's something I don't have precise language for. I think that's okay. Some things need more time than we're used to giving them. My apartment is quiet on Sunday mornings. I wake up without an alarm and make coffee slowly and sit by the window that faces east and gets good light in the fall. I have a bookshelf that I've been filling for 10 years. I have a couch that took me 3 weeks to choose and that I am unreasonably satisfied with. I have a kitchen that I cook in, really cook in, 3 or 4 times a week, because that turned out to be something I loved and didn't know for a long time. I have savings. I have work that I'm good at and that I care about. I have Petra, who has been my person for 2 decades through every version of my life. I have Janet Hess, who I call on her birthday every year and who always picks up. I don't have a family in the way I once thought I would, but I have built something, room by room, floor by floor. Everything laid by hand. There are people who would look at what I did with my mother and the envelope and the $100 and call it cold. I understand that. I've sat with it myself. But here's what I've come to believe. There is a difference between cruelty and honesty. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is hold up a mirror and say, this is the measure you used. I'm using the same one, not because I hate you, because the measurement was always the problem and someone needed to say so. I didn't give my mother $35,000. I didn't rescue them from a consequence that was never mine to carry, and I also didn't slam the door. I didn't disappear. I showed up. I sat at the table. I said the true thing. That is more than they gave me. I have been asked, since telling this story to a few people who know me well, whether I regret it, whether I wish I'd done something different. Honestly, no. I regret that it happened at all. I regret the March night, and the pot roast, and the yellow kitchen, and the 520s. I regret the 4 minutes on the porch, but what I did 10 years later. With full information, with time to think, with a clear sense of what I could live with, no, I don't regret that. The $100 was never about the money. It was never a practical decision. It was a communication. It said, you are not worth more than this to us. Figure out the rest. I gave it back. I said, you were never worth less than this to me. Now figure out the rest. That felt right. That feels right still. From a psychological perspective, what happened to me in that yellow kitchen at 18 years old has a name. It's called conditional worth. The idea, communicated explicitly or implicitly, that your value as a person depends on what you are to someone rather than who you are in yourself. I was worth keeping as long as I was the only option. The moment a better option appeared, the math changed. A lot of us grow up inside this kind of math without knowing it. We become good at being useful. We become fluent in need. We shrink to the size of what's required of us. And some of us, if we're lucky or stubborn or both, eventually find our way to a different equation. One where your worth doesn't depend on what you cost someone or what you can provide. The work of building that, of actually believing it in your body, not just in your head, takes longer than you think. It takes longer than the first year in someone else's house, or the first job, or the first paycheck, or even the first real home you make for yourself. But it happens. I can tell you that it happens. And when the people who once made you feel small show up at your door needing something, you will know exactly who you are. You will know what you can live with, and you will be ready. That's the thing about building from scratch. You know every floor you laid. You know it will hold. That's my story. I want to hear yours. Have you ever had to draw a line with someone who raised you? Have you ever been handed $100 and told to figure it out? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. If you found this story and it stayed with you, please subscribe. I share stories like this every week. And if you know someone who needs to hear this one, send it to them. Thank you for being here.